What's going on with Charles Oliveira? We've had rumors of 4 different fights in the past 2 or 3 days. We've had these 4 fights all get rumored, and we don't know which one is actually going to happen. So today we're going to talk about each of those matchups, what I think will happen, and what I want to see the most. But we're going to talk about how each of those matchups plays out. So stick around to hear my thoughts on Charles Oliveira's next fight. I'm Wyatt, and this is Fight Society. Okay, what's going on, guys? So we have had multiple Charles Oliveira rumors in the last 2 or 3 days. The first one is Charles Oliveira versus Dan Hooker. Now, this is something that I'm actually interested to see. It would be a good bounce back fight for Charles, but holy shit, Dan Hooker would get his fucking ass beat against Charles Oliveira. He'd either get dropped early or he would get guillotined on the first takedown attempt. But this would be a great co-main event for UFC 305, right below Izzy and DDP, if they don't do Sean Strickland and Robert Whittaker. Not much of a payoff here for Oliveira other than getting a win and having a more winnable fight, because his last few fights have all been against like top of the food chain guys. And then Dan Hooker, huge jump up in the rankings after coming off, what was his last fight? Jalen Turner? Like in November where he broke his arm. It's been forever. I could see this happening though. 305 is in need of some name value on the card. There is other things I would do with Charles Oliveira that they could get a lot more bang for their buck with, but I could see them making this happen. Oliveira is down to fight people that are down in the rankings or contenders, not necessarily all big money fights like when he fought Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. We move on from there to the biggest possible fight that they could make for Charles Oliveira right now, and that is against Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski has said that he wants to fight Charles Oliveira in his next fight. This could honestly be a pay-per-view main event with no belt on the line, or make it a pay-per-view co-main event, something like that. I have a weird feeling that Oliveira could low-key smoke Volk, but given the range and the grappling, but Volk was pound for pound number 1 for quite some time. I could see them making this. I think Volk is going to end up needing to do something because Brian Ortega said that Topuria versus Holloway is booked for the featherweight belt. So this could be something where they put it on the same card. It sets up some sort of Volk versus Ilya rematch if Ilya was to beat Max and Volk was to beat Charles. And then, but for the fight, it's a toss 'em up fight, but I think I would go with Charles Oliveira in that fight. But no doubt about it, this is the biggest fight that the UFC can make for these two guys right now. At least out of the 4 fights we're talking about. The next fight that is available, that has been rumored, is Charles Oliveira versus Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC Paris on September 28th. This is just a rumor, but via RMC Sport, Benoit has already signed the contract. It all comes down to Charles before it comes official. This would be a super undeserved fight for BSD. He just got his big shot up in the rankings against Dustin Poirier, and he took the L. I mean, there's no way around it. He took the L in very convincing fashion. He had staff. I understand that. But there's no way you're ranked like 13th. They give you a jump up to Dustin Poirier. You get knocked out. And then they give you an even higher jump up to Charles Oliveira. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if the UFC Paris card is in need of a main event, I can see it happening. Charles absolutely blows Benoit Saint-Denis out of the water. Not even a competitive fight. I know that might be a hot take because Benoit Saint-Denis is very tough. But Benoit just left his longtime coach, so there's going to be an adjustment period with whatever team he ends up with. Charles looking to get right back on it after the Arman Tsarukyan loss. He's motivated. This would be a fun fight, but I think it's probably the most unlikely fight of the ones that have been offered, or at least have been rumored. And the 4th fight that we have that's been rumored for Charles Oliveira in recent days, MMA Crazy on Twitter saying, being told that the UFC are targeting a return to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, on a fight night September 7th, which already is not true because they already have Burns versus Brady booked as a main event for that date. And I think it's the Apex card. This would definitely be a main event over Burns versus Brady. And Burns versus Brady is already announced as the main event. Maybe they switch them, who knows? But it says this would be the runner-up main event, being Charles Oliveira returning against Mateusz Gamrot, though nothing has been signed yet. So we have a few different options. This would probably be the one that makes the most sense in terms of the rankings. You give Gamrot finally his big chance against a big name where he's not fighting like an Arman Tsarukyan or like an RDA who's washed at this point. not like in a fucked up way, but washed. In terms of all of these fights, you have Hooker, Volkanovski, Benoit Saint-Denis, and Gamrot. Now, I think that of all of these that I'd want to see, it's got to be Volk. If I really want like the biggest name fight, definitely Volk. I think I'll take that over any of them. And then what else? BSD. That's a good fight, but it just doesn't make sense in terms of rankings. It doesn't make sense to have Charles out for another almost 3 months. He didn't get knocked out. He lost a decision. Dan Hooker, if they're trying to give Charles a bounce back fight, makes some level of sense. I understand that. But it's an undeserved jump up in the rankings for Dan Hooker. But two vets, both former featherweights, now at lightweight, two longtime UFC vets. It would be a banger fight. And with the UFC Perth card coming up so quickly, if they are desperately in need of a co-main event and they don't get Sean Strickland, Rob Whittaker, I see them making this fight. It actually does make sense. And then Benoit Saint-Denis, no. Gamrot would make a lot of sense given the rankings. Honestly, Gamrot deserves a fight like this, and I don't think he deserves a title fight yet. But then again, Arman Sarukian did just get suspended for 9 months. So you could see them just go, okay, we got to hold Arman out. Let's do Gamrot and Makhachev in like October or November, something like that. Or even, like October, I think 307 is in Salt Lake City. They could do that. Maybe they have plans to make Islam fight on Abu Dhabi. That's probably the most likely, if I'm being honest. But those are the fights I think the most winnable fight out of all of those, Dan Hooker or Benoit Saint-Denis. And then definitely the biggest fight out of all of those is against Volkanovski. So you guys let me know what you think. I think that Charles Oliveira is such a big name to where he can kind of pick and choose his opponents, where if he goes, nah, I want big money fights. I want to fight Max Holloway at 155. I want to fight Colby at 170. Then he can do that. He's already been champ. But if he does want to go back towards the lightweight title, then you got to do something like Dan Hooker or Gamrot. You got to actually fight contenders. But I wouldn't fault him if he just goes, nah, give me Volkanovski as a fight night main event or a pay-per-view main event, something like that. And then if Volk moves up and does this fight at 55, I could see Volk just staying at 55, which I don't mind. I think Volk could do very well at 145 or at 155. So let me know what you guys think. Out of these fights, who do you want to see Oliveira fight? You got Hooker, Volk, Benoit Saint-Denis, and Gamrot. And what do you think is the most winnable fight for him? So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want extra content aside from my regular videos, make sure to become a channel member today to get access to members-only live streams and other bonus perks. Click the link in the description down below or click the join button on our channel homepage. If you're interested in non-MMA content from me, make sure to check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World.